Chapter 2, The Greater Good, 2064. The room came to life without warning, a holographic representation of the subjects in the pods appearing in front of each one. At the centre of the room, a large, multifaceted crystal, a little taller than him, rose from the floor, and another descended from the ceiling. The crystals stopped just short before they touched, leaving a small gap between them that pulsed with a soft glow of different colours from crimson to cobalt and onward to a multitude of shades. "Holy shit," Daniel muttered, circling the room and gasping when a series of geometrical patterns appeared, circling the central pillar. "Those look like hieroglyphs." "Hiero?" "What?" Tamika asked, towering over them, having returned to her obsidian form, the light from the pillar cascading beautifully off her dark, polished skin. "Hieroglyphs," Daniel repeated, his high-pitched voice inching higher as he stared at the shapes floating by. "It's an ancient Egyptian language." The three of them stood in a circle around the pillar, the cylinders forgotten, Tamika crossing her arms, and her face creased with worry. "Where in Russia? Why isn't it in Russian then?" Bobby shrugged, his eyebrows narrowing at the swirling patterns in front of him. Tearing his gaze away, he returned to the pods lining the walls. From up close he could make out vague humanoid shapes, the faces and forms obscured by crystal. The holographic projection in front of the tube showed more hieroglyphs, along with more symbols that felt somehow familiar. "Holy shit, Bobby, come check this out," said Daniel from behind him. He returned to the centre of the room and found Daniel blushing furiously with a guilty look on his face. The central pillar, obscured by a projection of the earth slowly turning, with small glowing dots highlighting locations all over the world. "What did you do?" "Nothing," said Daniel, backing away from the projection, his eyes wide. "I was just looking, I swear." Getting closer, Bobby could identify multiple locations in North America. "That's Boston," he began in a whisper, recognizing the Mystic and the Charles Rivers. "And over here, that one is in Manhattan." "That one is somewhere in Utah," said Tamika, pointing to another dot. "Exactly what are we looking at?" Following her finger, Bobby's heart skipped a beat as a flash of memory burned through his mind, a memory of chaos in the desert, and a hidden city buried beneath the sands in the Valley of the Gods. It dawned on him in a panic that these were the places Elizabeth and Andrew had been going, the places she destroyed or tried to. His breath quickened when he saw locations he hadn't visited, a few on each continent. He was able to identify another 2 dots not far from this one in Siberia, and a multitude of them along the Nile Valley, and even more snaking along the banks of the Amazon River basin. What's wrong with Antarctica? It looks off. Everything else on this thing looks okay, except that, said Daniel, bending over to see the bottom of the image, not daring to touch it. Following his gaze, Bobby could see that the massive continent looked completely different, with a towering mountain range near the centre, and the coastline far different from what he remembered from what little schooling he had. "No ice," said Tamika in a small voice. "There's no ice." Bobby swallowed hard, brushing a hand across his face and making a decision. "We need to get out of here, lock this place down, and make sure no one ever finds it." "Are you nuts?" Daniel spat. "Washington sent us here to find whatever this is. We can't just tell him nothing was here except for an empty bunker." "Yes, we can, that's an order," said Bobby, his gaze drilling into the two of them. He remembered his vision of war and destruction from the Valley of the Gods, and he still bore the scars inside and out from Elizabeth's hand. "I'm not letting this technology out into the world, so we need to forget that we were ever here. We're not going to leave anything to chance. Daniel, I need you to collapse this entire structure on top of itself." "Understood." Before Daniel could speak, Tamika silenced him with a look, gliding close enough to him so no one else would hear. "Have you lost your damn mind?" she began in a harsh whisper. "Michael is a lot of things, but stupid ain't one of them. Doing this is going to be the end of us. You know him. He won't just let this slide." "He'll have to if there's no proof this place ever existed," said Bobby. "Daniel, can you do it? Collapse the whole thing in on itself, make it go so deep it would be impossible to find? Daniel's cherubic face fell, a look of worry darkening his features. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, Bobby. I can't just... You will, said Bobby through gritted teeth, taking him by the shoulders. Bishop Washington will only use the tech here to make himself more powerful. Sometimes you gotta make sacrifices for the greater good. Rubbing a hand across his eyes, Daniel nodded. Okay, I get it. Okay, let's move, said Bobby, turning heel to return the way they came, hurrying down the corridor, his long legs taking the stairs 2 at a time. Tamika, matching his stride, followed close while Daniel huffed along, stumbling to stay close. Reaching the surface, he was struck by a wave of cold, the crisp, cool air outside of the squat brick building freezing his nose hairs. I see you guys on the surface now. Is everything kosher? Asked Finn, the comm line crackling with static in Bobby's ear. We're good, stand by, said Bobby, his attention snapping back to the structure once they had moved far enough away. Does this work for you? He asked Daniel, his hands twisting in front of him. Daniel said nothing, simply nodding as he raised his hands, his face turning red from concentration. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, so subtle at first that he thought his imagination was playing tricks on him. Then a plume of dust shot up from the squat building, the brick of the structure vibrating like the entire place was out of focus. Daniel rotated his outstretched hand, taking sharp, short breaths as the entire building, fencing and all, began to sink, the growing tremors staggering them more with each passing moment. Bobby smiled grimly to himself as the entire nightmare complex, with its hidden secrets, vanished under the Siberian tundra, a sense of relief washing over him as his shoulders slumped. He was about to signal Finn for a pickup when the ground shook with enough force to knock the 3 of them to the ground. Bobby was deafened moments later by a rent in the earth, exploding with enough force to send plumes of dust and debris high into the air. Moments later, Bobby's heart sank when a dark shadow emerged from the dust cloud, floating above for a few seconds, before plummeting like a meteor toward them.